Meanwhile, not everything is going well in Putin's kingdom. There are very serious problems, this time truly without any rumors, facing Ramzan Kadyrov. A number of reputable media outlets, in particular the Ukrainian outlet Ukrinform, citing the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense, have reported that dictator Ramzan Kadyrov's kidneys have completely failed. Kadyrov is currently in his private hospital, which is situated in the city of Grozny. Members of his family clan have already arrived at the hospital, apparently gathering there to be present and possibly hear the dying man's last words. At the same time, there is now an active search underway for a new dictator of Chechnya. The main contenders for the position are Kadyrov's eldest son, Akhmat Kadyrov, the current head of the Chechen government, Magomed Daudov, as well as the commander of the Akhmat Abti Special Unit, Alaudinov. 20-year-old Akhmat is currently serving as the acting deputy prime minister of the Chechen government, and most likely he was supposed to eventually take over his father's position. Since the year 2004, Kadyrov has been diagnosed with a severe form of pancreatic necrosis, a condition which has a mortality rate of about 80%. This disease is considered extremely dangerous and life-threatening. This is extremely bad news for the Kremlin. But by the way, it's worth noting that Putin has also disappeared. He has hardly been seen since his New Year's address. That video where he supposedly went out for Christmas and lit candles with participants of the criminal war in Ukraine could actually be what's called an information canned good, meaning it was recorded who knows when, most likely even before New Year's. Otherwise, Putin is actually no longer being shown at all. Where has Putin gone? Where did he disappear to? The Kremlin also showed a video conversation, supposedly with a boy. In fact, they showed the boy whom Putin was calling, but Putin himself was not shown. You could only hear his voice on the phone. The only question is, was it really Putin? And again, when was this recorded? In this video, Putin asks the boy how he liked visiting the submarine. In short, Putin has disappeared as well. And the most important question, why did this happen against the backdrop of American attacks on Russian oil tankers? How could this be connected? And obviously there is a connection. The fall of the Maduro regime. Putin hasn't commented on this in any way, even though this was his key and main ally in Latin America. That's what we see. Zero reaction. And moreover, he hasn't appeared. And no one has actually seen Putin in public for the past 10 days. All the videos that have been repeated again are so-called information preserves, pre-recorded by the Kremlin press service and released at the right moment. There have been a large number of investigations about this. By the way, against this backdrop, there was trolling from the UK Defense Minister John Healey, who, when asked by a journalist which world leader he would kidnap, answered unequivocally, Putin. I would take Vladimir Putin into custody, and I would hold him fully accountable for the war crimes he has committed, including those that I personally witnessed in Bucha during one of my very first visits to Ukraine, and for the abduction and forced deportation of Ukrainian children. The question of whether kidnapping Vladimir Putin was a possibility came up this week, and let me put it this way, it is obviously an intentional provocation. They even asked former President Donald Trump whether he had ever considered the possibility of kidnapping Vladimir Putin. To this, Trump gave an evasive answer, saying, I don't think there will be a need for that. But at the same time, he didn't exactly rule it out either. In addition, today was another notable and successful day for the Ukrainian Defense Forces. 3 offshore drilling rigs belonging to Lukoil were hit in the Caspian Sea. All of this is very significant and important, again, both from the perspective of military transit operations from Iran, where Shaheds and other weapons are transported from the territory of this Islamic State. Today, the Filonovsky, Korchagin, and Greifer drilling rigs were hit, which, among other things, are used by the Russian army for its own purposes. The extent of the damage is currently being clarified. But I will repeat once again, this happened 1,000 kilometers away, and the Caspian Sea has ceased to be an internal sea of Russia and other states. In short, it's almost as if they've very clearly shown that they can firmly grab you by the testicles at the most unexpected and surprising moment, and from as far away as the enemy allows, as much as the enemy allows. OSINT analysts carefully analyzed the precise geolocation of the Oreshnik strike in the Lviv region, and after a detailed assessment determined that the strike was not carried out on Stry, which is the largest gas storage facility in all of Europe, but instead targeted the Sknyliv airfield as well as the Lviv aircraft plant. As a result of this attack, the runways of the airfield were damaged, among other things. The airfield building and the parked automobiles were also significantly damaged. This was reported by OSINT researchers who carefully conducted the geolocation of the strike. Well, basically everything is quite clear here. And finally, there is one more piece of news which is also very important in the context of Putin, who has disappeared, vanished without a trace, and it's still unclear exactly where this rat is currently hiding. On Russian TV, there is currently a complete and utter silence about the fact that the so-called special military operation has already lasted longer than the Great Patriotic War, as they call it. This is a Russian invention, of course. There was no such thing as the Great Patriotic War. There was World War II, but the Kremlin prefers to live by historical myths from the Soviet era, so there is a coordinated silence and ignoring of the topic. A number of Telegram channels are writing about this. Not a single Russian state-run federal television channel has officially reported that the so-called SMO has already lasted longer than the Great Patriotic War. In the news broadcasts on Channel 1, they primarily talked about targets and Russian strikes on infrastructure facilities in Ukraine. Rossiya 1 was showing supposed improvements in the positions of Russian occupiers at the front, the weather on the Baltic Sea, and bats, and the oldest carpet in the world. Well, that's a wonderful set of news stories. Nevertheless, the excess has already been recorded for 1,418 days. That's exactly how long the Russian military aggression has lasted. The so-called special military operation, which has long since ceased to be an SMO and has become a full-scale war. And the fact that it has now lasted as long as the so-called Great Patriotic War, of course, doesn't interest them, since this is a shameful topic, and once again, there's nothing to boast about. The results of the war are far from what the Kremlin and propagandists were counting on back in that now distant February of 2022. And very soon now, a sad and difficult date will arrive, the 4-year anniversary of the full-scale invasion. That will be in February, just a little over a month from now, and we will mark that date, mark this sad anniversary, and take a moment to reflect on everything that has happened since then. But it is a sad date not only for Ukrainians, but also for Russians and for the Kremlin, since they have still not achieved the goals they set. And at this rate, it seems they are heading toward their own defeat, just as Germany, which started World War II, eventually met its defeat, the country that started the war and ultimately lost it. And as we know, the Soviet Union, despite being part of the coalition of victors, ended the war with the worst outcome. The greatest loss in all of world history was suffered, and to this day the full extent remains unknown. It's clear that it wasn't the 20 million that Nikita Khrushchev spoke of. We're talking about numbers at least twice as high. The direct population losses of the then Soviet Union in that war, that's the result of Stalin's strategy: meat, 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 and more meat. In fact, nothing has changed. They fight in exactly the same way as they did, for example, 80 years ago.